I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. We've all been told to just be yourself, but psychologist and author Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, Chief Innovation Officer at ManpowerGroup and professor at UCL and Columbia, says that that's the worst advice you can take. In his new book, Don't Be Yourself, Why Authenticity is Overrated and What to Do Instead, he reveals why our obsession with authenticity is holding us back and what actually leads to success. My interview with Tomas is coming right up, but first...
Hey marketers, Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest, and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
You enjoy podcasts. We know because you're listening to one. Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. We love podcasts too, so much so that in addition to providing you with the great episode you're listening to, we also help businesses, brands, and even individuals produce their podcasts. MPN Studios offers podcast consulting and production services to help you get you or your business its very own podcast. We've helped dozens of smart people, advertising agencies, and brands develop podcasts. All you do is record your content or interview. We take that and deliver a professionally produced audio or video episode complete with show notes, transcriptions, and even promotional clips to use on social media. And our monthly subscription prices are hard to beat. If you or your company are jonesing to have your own podcast to establish thought leadership, drive business leads, or just have fun talking about your business or topic of choice, we'd love to help. Learn more at marketingpodcasts.net/studio. That's marketingpodcasts.net/studio.
Tomas, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, the old saying is, don't judge a book by its cover. But I saw your book, and more specifically, the title, and was intrigued. I guess I wasn't judging, but I was intrigued because it does seem to run counter to what all of us are told, especially as it intersects with your work at Manpower and how we present ourselves. So, where are we going wrong with authenticity?
Well, maybe, a good place to start is to perhaps realize that whether you try to be yourself or not, as the great Jarvis Cocker, singer of Pulp said, you're always going to be stuck with yourself, no matter where you go and what you do. So I think, saying just be you or don't be you is equally absurd in a way, because we are the sum of everything we do, whether we like it or not. And now, on a slightly more serious note, there's a lot of psychological research that shows that we're not very objective. This might not surprise you. We're not very objective when we judge whether our own behavior is authentic or not. So, typically when good things happen to you and you get a promotion, you get a job, a first date goes well, or somebody accepts your marriage proposal, you're inclined to think that that's all a consequence of who you really are, and you take credit for it. And when things don't go well, it's quite likely that you blame the rest of the world, your boss, the person who didn't show up, etc. Equally, when we judge whether somebody else is authentic, we're easily fooled. Some of the people who are deemed the most authentic leaders or the most authentic people in the world, actually, they are like method actors. They have spent so much time choreographing their professional reputation that they seem real. Just like when you watch a movie with Meryl Streep or Tom Hanks, wow, they seem, Forrest Gump or kind of Anna Wintour in The Devil Wears Prada. Actually, they're just very good actors.
That's a really, really good point. And but it almost seems, as you're saying, talking about how we take credit for things, it's almost like, and I mean, even here on the On Brand podcast, whether we're talking about individuals or organizations, I feel like authenticity comes up all the time. It's this cultural obsession. So what's the counterpoint? What should we be? What should be coming up as often as authenticity does?
Yeah, and I love the analogy with brands because there's a lot in common, between brands and people. Even restaurants, if you like. The first thing is that just like with restaurants, when they tell you they are authentic Mexican, authentic Chinese, authentic Italian, you can probably assume they're not. So just because a brand tells you they are authentic, or a company tells you they're authentic, or a person tells you they're authentic, doesn't mean they are. Also, it's really only as an attribution that we can understand this complex, intellectual, fantasize concept of authenticity at the level of brands. A lot of people might see Patagonia as an authentic brand. Why? Because they judge the actions of the leaders and the founder and the people in that organization, and it seems congruent with what, how they describe themselves or their identity. Equally, or at the other end of the spectrum, people have become quite cynical of, in the last 4 or 5 years, now it seems to have reversed itself a bit, but too many brands said they're not in it to make money, they're in it to make the world a better place. And if everybody says it, and then in the end, there's no actions to back it up, it seems an inauthentic display of virtue. So what's important there, whether we're talking about brands or people, is that we are all judged for what we do. And then, people can infer whether what we do is a reflection of who we are or not. And by the way, just because there is consistency between what you say and what you do doesn't mean you're a good person. Most of the brutal dictators in history were very consistent, and when it came to telling us or telling the world what they wanted to do, and they were just very cruel and evil and brutal. So sometimes you can be more prosocial if you, let's say, pretend to like your boss, but bitch about them when you get home, or a client, or a friend, than by just saying, listen, I'm just going to tell it how it is and as it is, because that's just who I am. And that leads to kind of a rigidity that can be quite antisocial. So there's a lot of nuance, as you can see, and the just be yourself advice misses all this important nuance.
So in the book, you talk about authenticity traps, and that sort of sounds like one of them. We think of authenticity as adherence to values, but as you know, you can take that too far. Are there other authenticity traps that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple of others, which might sound counterintuitive, but it's important to see kind of both sides of the coin. One is this notion, I think probably the most famous mantra associated with authenticity is this notion that you should just not worry about what people think of you. Ignore others, don't flex your behavior or adjust to other people's demands. If you do, you are kind of a, feeble or weak conformist, and you're a loser, basically. Well, in reality, there's maybe 5 or 6 decades of psychological research showing that, number one, the only way you can improve at anything is to understand how good you are at that thing, and that will come from internalizing, the feedback you get from others. So why are shows like The Office so funny? Whether it's the American version, the UK version, and others. Because you have these central characters, managers, Michael Scott and David Brent, who are profoundly unaware of their limitations and unjustifiably pleased with themselves. And they think they're funny when in fact, it's awkwardly uncomfortable. So if you want to, why again are talent shows like America's Got Talent so because the first round, there are people who think they're Pavarotti, and when they open their mouth, they sound like a strangled cat, right? And we see it as like, oh. Secondly, whatever you do and whoever you are, it's beneficial to understand that there are very, very few instances where the right to be you overrides your obligation to others. Having empathy, understanding what people need, and tweaking your behavior without doing it to such degree that you look like a politician and you're a phony and but finding that kind of delicate balance is very important. And then the last one, which is related, is this whole kind of bring your whole self to work idea. And, even when organizations tell you this, what they really hope is that you bring your best self, which typically is smaller than your whole self. I don't know about you, but my whole self includes, grumpy me, excitable me, argumentative me.
Multitudes.
I tried not to bring it to this conversation, for example. And in fact, at home, people are usually hoping that I take some parts of my whole self out and that they don't return. And, as I say in the book, the real you, in the sense of your unfiltered and whole self, is somebody who perhaps 4 or 5 people in the world have learned to love, or at least tolerate, and usually not for the entire duration of the Christmas or Thanksgiving lunch.
Oh, well, that seems like it would require something else that we hear a lot about today, and that is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And I wonder, what is the trade-off between emotional intelligence and authenticity?
This is a really, really good question, which I examine in a chapter in the book. And usually people who love the notion of authenticity also love EQ, and they think, they go hand in hand because they're both seen as positive concepts in the world of management and organization and leadership thinking. But actually, if you look at what EQ, emotional intelligence, really is, it's the ability to decouple between stimulus and response. It's the ability to act in a non-impulsive way. It's the ability to not just leak all your emotions in a genuine way, but to strategically manage what you convey and what you don't. If you think about the quintessential emotionally intelligent individual, they will be a great poker player. It will be somebody, again, who is a great actor, because even if they tell you that they really appreciate you when they don't, or that you did a great job with your assignment even when you didn't, you believe it because they're doing it. And that doesn't make them Machiavellian or a dangerous creature, because they can do this with empathy. A lot of the times what people want is not the brutally honest truth or transparency, but they want appreciation, validation, etc. So a lot of the research, in essence, shows that emotional intelligence is best understood as strategic impression management, is knowing how your behavior impacts on others, because you can tune into other people's thoughts and emotions, which is the very definition of empathy, and you're able to adjust accordingly. That doesn't mean that you're a social chameleon or somebody who, nobody knows what you stand for, because if that is the case, you'll be punished. The people who are telling everybody the same, and then you see that they're a phony or fraud. But it does mean that you can sort of add a psychological filter. Think of EQ or emotional intelligence as a kind of psychological or behavioral Instagram filter that you put between what you really think and feel and what other people need to hear.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Hey, have you heard about Podcast On? This is a global podcast charity event where hosts dedicate one episode to a nonprofit they care about and release it together the same week. No fundraising, no fees, just powerful storytelling for good. Podcast On 2026 runs March 14th to March 20th. Join thousands of podcasters worldwide and use your voice for impact. It's free, it's simple, and it starts at podcasthon.org.
The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of Podcast On.
My day kicks off with a refreshing Celsius energy drink, then straight to the gym. Pre-K pickup, back home to meal prep. Time for my fire station shift. One more Celsius, gotta keep the lights on. When the 3-alarm hits, I'm ready. Celsius. Live, fit, go. Grab a cold, refreshing Celsius at your local retailer or locate now at Celsius.com.
Now, back to the show. So as I sit here on this cold Iowa morning, drinking my cup of coffee, I'm reminded also of what you call the coffee drinker model of authenticity. And once again, judging books by its cover or by a label, I was intrigued by this concept. Tell us about the coffee drinker model.
Yeah, and and as we're speaking, I'm actually in Italy at the moment, where you're typically, the coffee is great and it's not as cold as where you are. But when it comes to coffee, people are rather, let's say, inflexible. And, you're not supposed to order a cappuccino after 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And really, there's just two orders. You either have an espresso, which you call a coffee or café, and that's a very tiny shot of, straight caffeine. What we know as Americano in the US or everywhere else is because an American tourist complained, it's like, are you kidding me? Is this it? And then they just diluted it with water, right? And but the analogy is quite simple to understand. It's like the majority of people don't want to consume a version of you that tastes like that straight, neat shot. They prefer to consume a version of you that has a little bit of water and then it's bigger, it's diluted, or a little bit of milk, maybe even soya milk, almond milk, maybe a little bit of sugar, maybe a little bit of everything. And, there are very, very few people who really, truly crave access to that unfiltered and raw shot version of you. That's, even when you think about your closest friends, when you go on vacation with them, you don't use their toothbrush or tell them everything you think. You kind of make an effort to adjust, So I think we should dilute ourselves like we dilute coffee or maybe even whiskey or a cocktail.
So I think about your manpower hat now, and I think about someone out there getting all of this authenticity advice, and they're like, okay, I got to try to be myself. I hear people say, bring your whole self to work. I'm trying to do all that. Now you're saying dilute myself. So if someone's making sense of that, what is our milk and sugar that we can add to our coffee?
Yeah, so even before we get to milk and sugar, it's like first ask or work out how that person likes to consume their coffee. It might be that they are lactose intolerant and then you don't want to put milk. It might be that they are, they really like that they're vegan or something and then they want kind of a substitute. So customizing or adjusting our behavior to meet others' expectations, again, seems like we're conditioned to think that it's a sign of weakness, but actually it's called adaptability and flexibility, and it is a strength, And then the second part is, yes, you kind of need to negotiate with others how much of your true self or your real you, whatever that is, by the way, I think usually you have to do 10 or 15 years of psychotherapy to find out who you really are. And, be careful what you wish there. It's not for everybody. Freud would say there are only two outcomes. You find out that you're neurotic and there is no meaning or answer to the question, and good luck. or you're psychotic, and then we can't persuade you that you're not Napoleon. But so I think it sounds a bit tough and rough, but it's convenient, especially for people who are approaching a job interview situation, joining a new company, etc., to understand that nobody really cares about who you really are deep down. What they want is a version of you that is predictable, reliable, that adds value to the team and the organization. And then if they seem to have some affinity with you and you seem to have something in common, sure, they might become more than a colleague and a friend. But you negotiate this slowly but steadily. It's a little bit like when you travel to a different country, you don't automatically impose your etiquette or your manners or your habits on that. You watch and you see how people behave, and you make an effort to adjust. If then you end up moving to that country and staying 5, 10, 15 years, okay, you can say, I'm going to rebel against this and, be who I am. Usually when people say, it's just who I am, it's more a sign of rigidity than a sign of strength.
So you talked about the travel comparison. You mentioned that you're in Italy. I'm in Iowa. I won't rub it in with my negative 39 wind chill here today. But I wonder, too, about what you've observed with cultural differences in authenticity.
Yeah, really, really, really important question. And it's a complicated question. When I speak about the book and my research in certain places, like let's say the West Coast of the US, LA, or Silicon Valley, people think, are you actually crazy? You're saying, authenticity is bad, which is a bit of a paradox, right? LA, probably the most fake place in America, and they are they are apparently kind of the biggest proponents of authenticity. But what's kind of also very interesting, you go to, I don't know, Scandinavia or East Asia or more collectivistic societies, and the reaction is like, we already know this. Why are you telling us this? And in fact, we live under so much pressure, having to conform all the time. And now you're coming and telling us, don't be yourself. Really? Even more? So it's interesting, right? Because, there is this whole range of things. But I think it is always true, universally true, wherever you are, that there are benefits in not being trapped in your own mind and not being so egocentric that you only think about who you are and, how you can unleash or express your identity to others. And there's always benefit in listening and understanding or trying to see what other people are like. I mean, let's face it, this is like footnotes to Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. In a world that is so self-obsessed that everybody just wants to talk to you about themselves and tell you who they are, if you actually listen and ask them a question and remember their names, wow, it will make you a super popular person.
So that alone is great advice. You teach, I teach at a university here, and also in your role at Manpower and seeing young people in the workplace. What do they need to know about authenticity as they set out in one of the more challenging workplaces in recent history?
That it's all about balance and degrees, and navigating the tensions and finding, the ideal spot between that kind of intricate balance between not seeming like a fraud, a phony, or a robot, because people want to see a personality, usually your colleagues, your bosses, your recruiters, but also showing that you are aware and respectful of the social etiquette that makes sort of like society possible. And I tell this story in the book of somebody who used to work in one of my teams and came up to their performance review now one day wearing a t-shirt that said, "Just be you, they will adjust." This was before I wrote the book, right? But it's like, and this person is a lovely individual and was a strong contributor to the team and a very smart and talented individual. It had never occurred to him that this was a very narcissistic or anarchic, at least, statement. I told him, either we all wear the T-shirt and then we have anarchy, or you're the only person wearing the T-shirt, and then the world just evolves around you, and you're a narcissist.
Yeah. Good point. Also about the varying messages one might find on T-shirts and dangers therein.
Yeah.
So I would not be a podcast host in the year 2026 if I didn't also ask about the intersection of authenticity, as we've been talking about, and AI, because I feel like we're left with, hey, that's what we're going to have as the authentically human component. But I feel like we say these things and we don't know exactly what they mean, but they're kind of passed out like candy and party favors. So when it comes to authenticity and AI, what's it mean, and what should we shoot for in the workplace?
Yeah. So look, first, AI is still a sort of a work in progress, and talking about AI is a bit like hitting at a moving target. It's not so easy, but I guess there's a couple of things that I would highlight. The first is much like with the world of diamonds, it is no longer possible to say whether any human output or creation is an analog, truly human production, or a synthetic silicon AI version. Our listeners or your viewers right now, they might think they know whether we are human or AI, but as you know, it's not possible kind of to realize. Like with the diamond industry, people are still willing to pay more for things when they think they have been done by humans than when they're told it's a lab-grown thing. And by the way, Spotify and all the streaming kind of platforms now, 40 or 50% of what people are listening to are artists that don't exist. So the question, I think, because I don't have the answer, is what does it mean to be authentically human, or for us as a species to be human, in a world in which machines can replicate so much of it? And I don't know what social media platform you use, but you have two interesting things or forces that are colliding. The first is that for some time before AI really became that big, we had this weird etiquette where you're supposed to be authentic, but everybody's fake in all the social media platforms. You're broadcasting a very, very aspirational version of yourself while pretending that is the natural you. Here I am, zipping champagne in the, United Airlines lounge, and my God, it's like, this is just a Tuesday morning for me, It's like, which actually makes people depressed, even though, all of this is fake. And then the other one is that it's already very hard to know. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, and it's become a place where AI posts articles or updates for other AI to comment on and respond. So I think in some ways now we are desperate to feel or think that we're interacting with somebody who is a human and who cares, which, by the way, has led people to do stuff with AI and add deliberate typos or errors or spelling mistakes so that people think you're dealing with a human. Apparently, by the way, for podcasters, swearing is a way to demonstrate that you're human, because AI doesn't swear. So maybe, in the future, you should always kind of have a swear word there so that people think that you're human.
That's a good fucking point.
There you go. Now we know.
There we go. Well, I saw
you just proved your humanity there.
That's it. If it's that easy, I'm good to go. Yeah. Well, that advice makes me smile, as I have several times in our conversation. But Tomas, it's now my turn to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of a kind of recency bias here, because a couple of days ago I listened to this podcast. I think it's a BBC podcast that basically does biographies or profiles of billionaires. It's called like Good, Bad, or Neither kind of billionaire. And they did this profile on Luciano Benetton, who is the founder of the Benetton brand, which was sort of like the first fast fashion brand for, for our younger listeners or audience. It was sort of like Zara, Gap, H&M, and all of that before then. And it was extraordinary, to see that this guy, who first of all came from a very poor village and, out of nowhere, developed so many of the innovations that exist today. He would go to Princess Diana and turn her into an influencer, early influencer, wearing that. He had these famous photographic campaigns that were very controversial with a famous photographer who happened to be the son of the photographer who took the only picture of Mussolini being hung in, after the kind of, he was found by the resistance. But actually, the message was deeply moral. He was doing a lot of stuff about diversity, inclusion. United Colors of Benetton was an attempt to say, look, we're all the same, which pissed people off. Of course, he had also famous campaigns of like a nun and a priest kissing. So he was very, very modern or ahead of the times. They canceled him in many places. He worked out, the franchise model of fast fashion. He worked out how to react to trends and create things very quickly on that. And I think he was a little bit anarchic and contrarian, not to the point of like Elon Musk, let's say, but still had a moral conviction, which I appreciated, So I think... I grew up in Argentina, but in the 80s when I was growing up, this brand started to be everywhere. So it was interesting to me to think about that. And I just thought it was a nice European brand that we had there. And now to find out about all the history behind it, So great. I'm a personality psychologist. I'm always fascinated to see how much of the person, the leader, you can still see in the brand. And by the way, he's still alive. I think he's 94 and still going. So there you go. So I picked Benetton because it made me smile and it made me think, which I think is even more important and difficult these days when AI is doing all the thinking.
Indeed, a very on-brand smile. So where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my website, which is drtomas with no h.com, drtomas.com.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which people can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Tomas, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you for having me.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.